Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Focus, Getting Kids to Pay Attention. We are so excited to share this valuable information and help you understand the issues of focus and attention challenges in children and help you identify why a child you know, or maybe your child, might be unable to stay focused at school or at home. Before we get started, we wanted to start with a couple housekeeping items. First, we just wanted to say thank you so much for all of those who re-registered to join us this week. We had a global GoToWebinar technical problem last week. It was an issue that GoToWebinar was having, and we were unable to log on and start the webinar. So we really appreciate you all for taking the time, not only last week, but then this week to join us a second time. Have over 1,800 people registered for this webinar, so we're really excited to get into this topic and hope that you find that information valuable. We will be recording the webinar. It will be sent out to all those who registered, whether you attended or not. If you had to leave early, you're still going to get the recording, so you can view it again anytime on demand after today. Secondly, we'll be answering questions at the end of the webinar. So please feel free to put your questions in the question chat box that's in your GoToWebinar screen, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can with time permitting at the end. I'd like to start by taking this opportunity to introduce today's speaker, Rebecca Jackson, who is our Vice President of Programs and Outcomes for Brain Balance Centers. Rebecca brings heart knowledge and firsthand experience from her past working with over 1,000 students as she served as Executive Director for multiple Brain Balance Centers. We are really pumped for this topic today. We know it's a hot topic going into the school year, so with that, I'm going to pass it along to Rebecca Jackson.
Great, thanks, Victoria. I'm going to start today with an introduction for you to my dog, Gus. Gus is a poodle pointer, which is a really random breed of dog, but he is a breed of dog that has been bred to be incredibly high energy. In fact, my husband runs with Doug multiple times a week, and a 5-7 mile run in the morning with Gus does nothing to fatigue him, to tire him out. If anything, I have felt like over the years we have trained his endurance to be even higher. And several years ago, our crazy hyper dog and I did some obedience training together so that we could work on some household manners and rules. And I was taking Gus for a walk one day, and what I noticed in working with Gus that ended up being such an aha moment for me is what fatigued Gus and wore Gus out was asking this high energy dog to sit still and to move slowly. So I have found that the best way to fatigue Gus is not a 7 mile run, but taking him on a slow and leisurely walk around the neighborhood where we have him stop and sit, we stop and visit with people. And what I found is for Gus to contain the natural tendency for his body to run and move and go takes far more energy than it does for him to run and move and go. So not that I'm trying to equate any of our children to dogs, but it just was that aha moment for me of sometimes we're asking our kids to go against the opposite of what their bodies want to do. And for us to keep in mind and remember that when we're asking them to pay attention and sit still, especially if it's something that they struggle with, that it's incredibly challenging and hard for them to do, or it can be. And so to keep in mind, when your child's able to hold it together throughout the day at school and then they come home and they utterly melt down, that right there is a sign that they had to work really hard during the day to hold it together, to sit still, that Gus on a leash of having to really pay attention and move slowly. So I just wanted to share that little aha moment I had with Gus. Maybe that resonates with you as well. So what we're going to talk about here today is I want to start by asking the question is, what would it look like for your child in your household if attention and focus went better this year than what it's gone in the past? Even for us as adults, sometimes we would like our attention and focus to be better. Our attention is pulled in so many different directions on a daily basis, whether it's, information on our phones and work and everything happening around us. So we really want to think about how could it impact your child? How could it impact your family if attention and focus was better? and then to really start to get a great understanding of how attention and focus develops so that we understand what are things that we can do to enhance it and make that attention and focus even more impactful. So let's start with just a quick, kind of boring Webster's definition of what attention is. Attention is the act or power of carefully thinking about, listening to, or watching someone or something. It's notice, interest, awareness. It's a primary cognitive function critical for perception, language, and memory. So clearly something that's necessary to be successful in school, as well as in friendships, to be able to pay attention and follow along to a conversation, to retain that information, and then respond accordingly. So attention and focus has a huge impact on our experience in school, as well as at home and friendships and relationships. So it's bigger than just simply school. Oh, sorry. When we think about all the different factors that have an impact on our ability to pay attention and focus, I always think of these factors in two different buckets. There's a list of factors that we sometimes have a little bit of an ability to have an impact on, and then there's other factors that may be more difficult to have a direct impact on. But again, when you picture your child sitting in a classroom, thinking about everything pulling that attention and focus, there's background noise from kids talking and giggling and somebody dropping a pencil. There's the teacher up at the front of the classroom talking. Classrooms are often an array of bright colors and busy information. So there's all these external factors having an impact on that attention and focus. There's also some pieces that we're able to have a little bit more of a direct impact on that also impact our success with attention and focus. So a couple of the pieces that with our kids, we sometimes have a little bit more of an ability to impact is a child's sleep. For those of you, if anybody follows me or have attended any of these previous webinars, I managed to work this picture of my son into just about every talk that I've ever given. Drew is typically a very low-key, mellow kid. You can see the cars packed up and loaded. Clearly, we were on vacation. And so even the best of children in great circumstances, if they're overly fatigued, they're going to have less success and less of an ability to control that. Nutrition. What we eat has a huge impact on our attention and focus and our ability to control that. And from time to time, I'll get somebody saying, you know, I really don't think that food has an impact on those things. But when you think about how you feel after too much caffeine or too much sugar, I know for me, sugar gives me a really jittery, kind of almost sick, icky feeling. And so we get that spike in energy and then we get a crash. How about that moment that we call hangry, of when you're really hungry? You have a really hard time focusing and concentrating and making good decisions on anything at that point. So absolutely, what we're feeding our kids, especially in the morning before sending them off to a day at school, is going to have an impact on their ability to attend and focus. Stress management also has a big impact. Again, we've all had those times where if you have something heavy and worrisome weighing on your mind, it makes it much more difficult to concentrate on anything else. We can't always control all of the stressors in our lives, but really trying to equip our kids with some great stress management tools, and knowing that doing things like lots of exercise can really help your body and in how your body handles and perceives stress. So again, we've got external factors like the kids talking in the classroom and the visual distractions. We've got other pieces that we're able to have a little bit of an impact on: your child's sleep, their nutrition, their degree and level of stress. But regardless of all those outside influences, we place expectations on kids. And I know our knee jerk as a parent is to say, come on, you're 10 years old, you're in 5th grade, you should fill in the blank. But we have to remember, so many of our kids, even if they're 10, it doesn't automatically mean that all aspects of their development are 10. So we might have a 10-year-old that may have parts are aspects of development that are that of a 6-year-old. And a 6-year-old's ability to pay attention and focus and to manage and modulate those external factors of noise and movement and fatigue is going to be much less than that of a 10-year-old. So one of the things that I'd like you to keep in mind is, again, it's not just about the age of your child, it's also about their developmental ability. Where are they truly at, and is that matching up with their actual age? So to be careful on, we place expectations on all kids based on age, and sometimes we really need to place expectations more on ability than their actual age. So now I want to get into talking about 2 different types of attention and focus. This was something that was absolutely fascinating to me when I learned. And again, if you've followed some of the webinars previously, you will have heard some of this information. But when we think about attention and focus, we talk about it like it's one thing, but we actually have many different aspects of attention and focus. And again, I'll have a parent say to me, I don't know if my kid really has ADHD. He can sit and play video games for hours. So as long as he's doing something he loves, he can pay attention, no problem. So I don't think it's truly an attention and focus issue. I think he's bored or doesn't like the task. Maybe that's true, maybe not. However, what we know about attention and focus is that we have different types of attention and focus networks and pathways. So for example, we have something that's called our short-term reward-driven attention networks. These networks are only firing attention for about, say, picture a really short increment, maybe 15 or 30 seconds. So when a child is playing something like a video game, they're really only truly paying attention for that 30-second increment, and then there's some sort of reward that causes them to re-engage and pay attention again. So when a child's playing 2 hours of video games, that does not count as 2 hours of sustained attention. That is 30-second increments of attention and focus strung together 240 times, and there's a constant brain reward happening. So when we're working those networks and pathways, we're building the pathways that require constant attention, constant reward for the child to pay attention. So when you think of things like social media, I find myself, and this is a terrible habit, but I find myself, even when driving in the car, if I'm sitting at a red light, I'll grab my phone and just quick check my email or check social media. Those are those attention and focused short-term pathways saying, hey, give me a reward, check your social media, check your Facebook, check your Instagram. And then when we see, oh gosh, we got lots of likes on today's post, that gives that dopamine, that reward system in your brain activation. So when our kids are doing things like social media, even when you're having a conversation with maybe somebody that you have some romantic interest in, so everything's really heightened in that attention and focus and your curiosity, and the more they talk to you and interact, the more you're going to continue to pay attention. So there's positive things that come from our short-term reward-driven pathways, but we need to keep in mind that that's only one aspect of attention and focus. Now, the other side of this is we also have our sustained non-reward driven pathways. These are the pathways in our brain necessary to do things like drive across the country, do a work project. As much as I absolutely love brain balance, there's not, believe it or not, constant rewards that happen all day long, keeping me motivated and keeping me engaged. I need to have the internal ability to continue to pay attention, to continue to work, even when I'm not constantly rewarded. So when we think about what our child needs to be successful throughout a school day, they have got to have successful pathways in the sustained non-reward driven aspect, to be able to pay attention in class, to read a book, to write a paper, to turn in a report. And what's interesting is you can only engage or work one set of pathways at a time. So if you're listening in class and you're also checking your social media, which, you know, we never do anything with one device these days. Even if you're watching TV, we'll watch TV with a phone or tablet, and we're scrolling through one thing while doing the other. If you're sitting in a lecture still checking your social media feed, you're still working those reward-driven pathways. So I really want you as parents to be cognizant of, it's important that we have both of those networks and pathways. When you're in a soccer game and you've got to be paying attention and moving quick and moving to the right part of the field to score a goal. Those are your short-term reward-driven pathways. And again, so much of school is dependent on the long-term sustain. So we truly need both. However, what we're seeing in today's population is we're absolutely spending more and more time building our reward-driven pathways, making it harder and harder for kids to really use those sustained pathways. So I challenge you, all of you, for both yourself and your kids, is pay attention on a daily basis. What are you doing that's utilizing those short-term reward pathways, and what are you doing to build and work and exercise your long-term pathways? People always ask me, what are examples of things that you can have a child do that's going to build those long-term pathways? It's anything that you're not rewarding. So, I always use silly examples like paint a fence, mow the yard, read a book. It just about anything, cleaning the house, anything where you're not getting that immediate gratification, immediate reward is going to be working those sustained pathways. And again, more and more our kids, when they're on devices, on the computer, same with ourselves, watching television, all of those pieces are stimulating those short-term pathways. So we need to make a cognizant effort of making sure that there's also times in the day that we're balancing that to really build and drive those sustained pathways. So I hope that makes sense. So again, to me, it's not about screen time is bad, physical activity is good. To me, it's about a balance of our kids need to be good with technology because that's the way of the world. But it's important that we balance that with lots of physical activity and movement, as well as those non-reward exercises and activities. So where does good attention and focus come from? What's so important to understand is attention and focus is actually a result of development. When you look at a toddler, you expect a 2-year-old to be able to pay attention for about 2 minutes. And as the child develops and grows up, that attention span should increase. So again, a 2-year-old is going to be very in the moment. I'm going to color and scribble on a page for 1 minute, and then I'm going to wander over and pick up something that caught my eye, and I'm going to wander over and play with somebody. That's appropriate attention and focus for a 2-year-old. You should be able to sit with a 2-year-old and read the child a book before bedtime. So there should be those moments of being able to sustain that a little bit longer. But in play and movement, you're going to see those really short bursts of attention and focus. So as a child continues to grow and develop, you're going to notice those attention pathways getting stronger, allowing that child to pay attention longer and longer till they get to a point of being able to sit in a classroom. Picture a first grade classroom. There's not a lot of movement. It's a lot of sitting and paying attention and following along. So if we have good, healthy development, we expect to have good, healthy attention and focus. So when we look at what comes together developmentally that results in attention and focus, it's a whole series of events. I picture development to be like a chain or string of dominoes of we need each domino to fall just right in order to have that end result. So this is our pyramid of development that we refer to often at Brain Balance, with the top of the pyramid, the goal being great attention and focus, appropriate social interactions, success with academics. And it's all these individual pieces and functions that come together that create success in those areas. So we see all babies should be born with a set of primitive reflexes. So for example, when you touch an infant's cheek and they turn to latch on to eat, that's an early developmental piece there for survival. And the more we work that reflex, the more the child starts to develop the ability to control their mouth so that they can eventually chew and swallow and talk. So we've got this set of primitive reflexes that the more we use them, the more they start to build the part of our brain that allows us to perceive our sensory information. It strengthens and coordinates our muscles. And the more a child runs and moves and plays and has lots of different sensory stimulation and input, like going barefoot on the grass and playing in a sandbox and swimming in a pool, the more they start to build the part of the brain that gives us their body awareness. This is going to impact the way, again, they're able to move and balance and coordinate their body. This is going to underlie their ability to watch a friend's face while they're having a conversation to realize, okay, they need to back off, they're standing too close, or they're irritating that child. And so again, the more we run and move and play and interact, then the more that part of the brain is going to start to build the part of the brain that allows us to process visual information and auditory information, the way our eyes coordinate to move. And the eye pieces ends up becoming a really important bridge to developing the part of the brain that ultimately is going to lead towards success at a very high level in those attention and focus pathways. So again, we can't expect great attention and focus if there's gaps and holes in development. So with development to result in great attention and focus, there's two key aspects. The first aspect is we've got to develop those networks, those pathways of short-term reward-driven focus and the pathways of sustained focus. The next piece is we also then need to develop control. So if you have all of the tools, but you don't know how to use the tools all together, you're still going to end up with some struggles. So, and we're going to talk about that control piece a little bit more. So hold that thought, we'll come back to it. So let's talk about how these networks develop. What's fascinating to me about the brain is made up of billions of neurons, and each neuron, when it fires, has the potential to connect to up to 1,000 other neurons. So if there's a challenge in one area of the brain, because of the way it's so interconnected to everything around it, it can have an impact on many, many other things. And I say that because if a child's struggling with attention and focus, that's not going to be the only challenge. There may be challenges with reading comprehension. There may be challenges with blurting things out at the inappropriate times, or maybe coming across as a little more socially immature than their peers. Maybe the child struggles with being able to hear and retain everything that's being heard, or to follow a multi-step direction. So everything in the brain is very, very interconnected. So what happens is each time that nerve fires, it's bringing information from one part of the brain to the other. So it's like pathways and highways, interstates across our country. And the more we drive those roads, the more solidified those pathways are. So by working on those sustained pathways and doing boring, long activities, that's a way to actually exercise and strengthen the parts of our brain that do those sustained pathways. Now, what's neat is we are able to build and create new pathways, and that's the process of learning. So what happens when you're learning something new? So let's say you're smelling that cup of coffee. You smell that cup of coffee and pretend that you've never smelled coffee before. You smell that cup of coffee, and a message is going to fire through multiple neurons into your brain to say, okay, this is what that smells like. It's kind of strong, a little bitter. It smells really good. And then somebody's going to tell you the word coffee. So to do that, it's a whole set of neurons or chain of events that fire. Then what happens is when you do it again and you do it again, learning is when those chain reactions become solidified. So now every time you smell coffee or say the word coffee, there's the same chain of events of neurons that fire. Same thing when you're learning something physical. All of us here on the phone should be able to very easily do a jumping jack. If you can do a movement without thinking about it, you can do it while having a conversation. That's an example of a solidified pathway. That's something that you've learned. As soon as you start to do that exercise, the same neurons fire every time in the right timing, in the right sequence. Now, if I were to say to you, okay, now we're going to do a jumping jack, but we're going to do a reverse jumping jack. And every third time, I want you to do a double hop. You can do that, but now that's not a learned piece. It's not going to be smooth and fluid. You're not going to be able to carry on a conversation while you're doing that. So those are neurons that you're getting to fire very sluggishly, and you're thinking it through and you're working it out. But if you do that often enough, that will now become a learned pattern or a learned step. So again, I'm talking about this because our goal is to build those attention and focus networks and pathways. So the more we use them, the more solidified they come. But again, we can't jump right to the symptom. We can't jump right to building those attention and focus networks if there's any challenges in the connections that lead to those higher level developmental pieces. Let's talk about what it is that engages a neuron. How do you build pathways and fire the brain to solidify the best, most efficient patterns and pathways in the brain? What's great is the strongest engagers of the brain, the strongest drivers of development in the brain are our senses and our muscles. And luckily kids naturally seek out all of these things. And you'll see just, again, developmentally, kids play with touch and sound and texture. When a baby puts something in their mouth and then they put their hand on their mouth, that's when they're starting to learn the difference between soft and non-soft. They bite on their finger first, they stick a finger in their mouth and bite. So it's that exploration of texture that the brain begins to learn. So again, some of the best things that we can do for our kids developmentally, especially after they've been seated all day long in a classroom, is to allow the kids to run and play and move. And I'm sorry, I just got a note saying I cut out for a second. I'm not sure why I did that. Again, this will be recorded, so if there's anything that you missed. So
yeah,
again,
maybe if you just cut out very briefly right before you said the best thing to do for your child developmentally, especially in looking forward to the school year. So maybe if you just go back a couple sentences,
sure.
that would be awesome.
So the best things to do for your kids developmentally is allowing them to play with senses and to move. So especially after they've been sitting all day long in the classroom, before you ask them to come home and sit down and do homework and pay attention even more, let them run and move and play, because using those muscles and engaging the senses is actually going to wake up the brain and turn it back on, allowing them to do even better with attention and focus. So senses and movement are two of the biggest, most important pieces in healthy development to address if there's any gaps and holes, as well as waking up the brain. So again, we talked about all these different pieces in the brain coming together. So we need to build those networks and pathways leading to higher level brain development. And then we mentioned that the other aspect that's key is developing control, that top-down control. What that is it's our ability to develop inhibition. So a huge aspect of development is learning to not move when we're not supposed to move, to not blurt things out. And so I'll never forget, I was with my daughter when she was about 3 and we walked into the grocery store, and maybe she was 2. She shouted really loudly, "Mommy, that lady needs to brush her hair." It was absolutely true. It was completely inappropriate for her to shout that out, but 2-year-olds do that. They haven't developed the inhibition to keep the thought to themselves. As we mature and develop, we develop that filter, that ability to say, think it, don't say it, think it, don't do it. I love the example of emerging inhibition when we talk about learning to read with a child. When you look at the progression of how a child learns to read, we start by saying letter sounds out loud and sounding things out. And then once a child becomes a very proficient reader out loud, then the child starts to do silent reading. If you watch an early silent reader, they're still going to be whispering the words or mouthing the words to themselves. By the time that reader gets a little bit older, they're able to completely read, and they're going to inhibit all sound and movement. So what's great is this developing inhibition is really, it's protecting the brain. It's requiring less energy to read if you're reading silently without movement. So keys to developing good attention and focus means we've got to develop good attention and focus networks and pathways. So we've got to have great development that leads up to that. Then we also need to develop the brain's ability to inhibit. So again, when you picture that classroom environment with kids talking in the background and, you know, at home doing homework, there might be siblings and a dog barking, somebody knocking on the door, the TV might be on in the other room. Our brain needs to develop the ability to inhibit so that I can tune out background noise to pay attention to what I'm working on. I can tune out visual information. Those things don't automatically happen for everyone. We all have the tendency to assume that because my brain is able to do that, that my child's brain is able to do that as well. And we've got to remember that that ability to block out background noise or to block out extra visual information is the result of good, healthy development. So again, if I have a 10-year-old that's struggling with attention and focus, I know that that brain is going to struggle a little bit more with inhibition, and they're going to be more easily distracted, which means it's going to take that child more energy and effort to tune out all the background sound and noise and to hold still and pay attention. I picture that inhibition like a bike helmet to protect the brain. If we're not blocking out and tuning out that extra noise, our brain is actually working even harder. So when I'm sitting in the classroom and the teacher's at the board writing information, and there's a ton of visual information in front of me, if my brain is processing all of that information, it's having to work really, really hard. Versus the brain that's more highly developed is going to have the ability to only process what's important. So to block out and ignore the wiggly kid next to them and the bird flying by in the window, and only pay attention to what that teacher is saying. So high level development provides inhibition, which helps us save energy in the brain to help us continue to pay attention and focus. So what happens if we don't develop all of the proper stages of healthy development that result in inhibition and focus? So what does that look like? I want to introduce to you a little boy named Ryan. Ryan is an absolute doll. He is, obviously you can see he's cute as cute can be. This kid is personality plus. And when Ryan's mom first reached out to Brain Balance several years ago, she reached out because there were struggles. There were teacher emails and phone calls on a very regular basis, lots of additional teacher conferences, lots of marks on Ryan's card. And this had been going on for quite some time. And ultimately, Ryan at dinner one night said to mom, no matter how hard I try, I just can't. And ultimately, Ryan felt like he was a bad kid. I know this kid. He is not a bad kid. He's just full of energy, full of personality. And he was like my dog, Gus. Awesome dog, but just so hard to rein in and sit still and pay attention. But it made Ryan feel like he was a bad kid because of the constant marks on his card and teacher calling his name out. So when mom realized how it was impacting how Ryan felt about himself, she really decided to reach out to Brain Balance and see what could be done. So Ryan is that real life example of awesome kid who is at age appropriate, even ahead of age appropriate in multiple areas, but had some gaps and holes in development, resulting in some of those struggles with attention and focus and inhibition. The good news for kids like Ryan is that the brain can change. This is such an exciting area of science, showing that through a layered approach of sensory stimulation and academic engagement and repetition, that we're able to develop new pathways in the brain. We can increase speed and organization so that there's greater success in the outcome of these pieces. Going live on our Brain Balance website very soon, we're really excited to share some preliminary evidence from an ongoing Harvard McLean University research study looking specifically at ADHD. And what's so neat with this study is they did pre and post brain imaging, and that brain imaging showed physical changes in the brain taking place as a result of some of the brain balance exercises. Students also saw, many of the students, an increase in focus. And what was really neat is they also did a 7-month follow-up with many of the students where they reassessed things. And they were able to see that while there was change after doing aspects of the Brain Balance program, 7 months later, though, they were also seeing those changes sustained over time. I'm excited to continue with that study. So again, what we see is at Brain Balance, we're starting with an assessment. We're able to go in and work to identify if there's gaps and holes for a child. You know, for parents, so often the question is are the behaviors that we're seeing, are the challenges that we're facing, is it because it's a 7-year-old boy, or is it because there's a little bit something more going on? So starting with the assessment allows us to pinpoint what pieces are age appropriate and what pieces aren't functioning at age appropriate. To me, if we don't understand where the challenges are coming from, it's very difficult to create an action plan for change. And then what we do at Brain Balance is through working and engaging the senses and body movement and coordination and timing, we layer all these pieces on to wake up and utilize these areas of the brain, to build those pathways and engage them over and over and over again, so that we're building more and more pathways for aspects of attention and focus, inhibition, all those pieces we need to be successful in the classroom. So a follow-up, this is 2 years later for Ryan. Ryan did program at the very end of 2nd grade. Ryan is now a 4th grader. He's a 10-year-old boy, which means he's not perfect. He's still cute as can be. He's still personality plus, but his confidence, and this is my favorite part, Ryan's confidence has just gone through the roof, where he is a smart kid, he's a good kid, and he knows it. His level of responsibility and accountability, both at home and in school, have increased tenfold. We give my own kids a hard time because Ryan routinely does the dishes at night, as his mom has shared, and so we're working on more chores and responsibility for my kids. So Ryan, when they were able to address those gaps and holes in development, they were able to really move the dial in his ability to hold still, pay attention, to inhibit the movements and thoughts and noises and things that were coming out, interfering with his success with attention and focus at home and in the classroom. So I always think of, as parents, our goal is to do everything we can to set our kids up for success. Ultimately, we want to raise kids that are independent, productive members of society. And there's so many things on a daily basis that create more challenges for our kids, making it harder for them to be successful. So if you have a child that stayed up late the night before, that's going to push them a little bit closer to the edge of how successful they're going to be in school the next day. If they didn't eat a great breakfast, if it was a sugar breakfast where their energy is going to spike and then valley, if they've got lots of stress going on, those are all pieces that's going to make it more and more kind of push your child closer and closer to that point of where they become symptomatic or struggling with things. Then if you add to that, if there's any gaps and holes in those development pieces, that child is going to need to work even harder to be successful in those pieces. So I always ask myself the question is this child living 2 feet from the edge of the cliff where they are going to struggle with attention and focus, or they may melt down or may not retain the academic information, or are they living 2 miles from the edge of the cliff? And our goal is to have the best development in place so that if there are a couple of days of late nights and less nutritious meals, that it's not completely derailing things for the child, that they can still tolerate those ebbs and flows. So hopefully that gave you a little bit more of a sense of understanding of that attention and focus is the result of development, and good development is going to equal good attention and focus, which means if there's a need to improve attention and focus, it's probably most likely going to come back to addressing development. But what are some things that you can do at home right now to improve these things for your child? Something that my kids probably get sick of me saying all the time is the line, use your muscles to engage your brain. When we use our muscles, it turns on and wakes up our brain. It's why when our we do is we stretch. When you move a muscle, it fires input into the brain. So when we want our kids to having them use their muscles to train their brain before sitting down to do something that's going to require attention and focus is going to set you up for success. And I know initially that's a little counterintuitive, where you feel like if I have them run around first, then they're going to be wound up and wild, and it's going to be harder to get them to sit down and focus. That may be true initially, but it will become a part of your pattern and routine. And so if you put your school routine into, when you get home from school, have a snack that, by the way, should have some protein and fat in it, then go use your muscles, get those wiggles out, wake up your brain. Then we're going to sit down and have a focused chunk of time to knock that homework out. You can do brain breaks that use muscles. And so if your child is one that is needing to spend multiple hours on homework at night, not having a child sit for longer than 20 to 30 minutes, depending on development, and giving them even just something as simple as a 1-minute brain break. So if they just finished math and now they've got to start working on spelling, is taking a minute to even do something as simple as, jump up and down 100 times, or go sprint the stairs 3 times, and then come back and let's go into your next subject. So again, use your muscles to turn on and engage your brain. Heart rate variability is also a really important piece. Is when we spike our heart rate, our body has to rest and recover. And so when you spike the heart rate, it actually ends up working out the calming system in our body. So doing heart rate variability is great. In the classroom, also doing homework, how you sit matters. Again, this goes back to use your muscles to turn on your brain. If you're totally slouched and relaxed, you're not engaging any of your core muscles, so you're firing less input into your brain. Muscles set the idle speed for the brain. So if you want to rev up your brain, use your muscles. So when we sit up straight and we're engaging those core muscles, again, it's going to engage and turn on and rev up your brain. So the old adage of sit up to pay attention is completely true. So encourage your kids to sit up in the classroom and at home. So notice what chair they're sitting in when they're doing homework and how they're using that chair. So what you can do right now, move, minimize screen time. So again, I'm not saying that screen time is bad, but we want to have that balance of it. And know that when your child is spending a lot of time watching a video game or watching even a television show, it's a ton of information to process. So their body's not moving, which makes the brain sleepy, and they're having to process a ton of information. And so spending a lot of times on screens is actually can be considered fatiguing for the brain versus movement wakes it up. So if they are spending time, if they've needed to do a project on the computer for school or took some downtime by playing a video game after school for a little while, it's great to then counter that with, you know, go run around the block a couple times or ride your bike, jump rope, do something movement wise to turn things back on. What you eat matters. Again, what we know, sugar is going to spike the brain for attention and focus, and then we're going to get a crash. Things that help to maintain and sustain long-term healthy fats and protein. Those things take your child's body and your adult body longer to process. And so it's going to help to maintain good attention and focus. So if you have a child that has core classes in the morning and they tend to struggle with attention and focus, something, you know, that's just carbs and sugar isn't going to be the best start to the day to set them up for success. So doing a breakfast that has some good fats and protein. And there's a lot of ways to do that. We do a lot of smoothies at my house, so we can do a protein powder. We'll add avocado or coconut oil to the smoothie to get some good fats in. My kids used to do a ton of oatmeal. And we would do, we'd mix in some peanut butter or some nuts or even some protein powder in the oatmeal. So that way they were getting some protein and even some good fats in with the oatmeal. So think, you know, you can think beyond just eggs and bacon, but making sure that you're getting some protein and good fat is going to help to maintain that mood and energy and attention and focus. Sleep. There are some great sleep studies from Cambridge Brain Science, and it's fascinating. But what they found is for an adult, the ideal amount of sleep is 7 to 8 hours. Less sleep has a huge impact on our cognition factors, which are going to be things like memory and focus. Too much sleep had a detrimental impact as well that was essentially equal to too little sleep. Obviously, kids need more sleep, their developing bodies, than an adult does, but really making sure that you're creating healthy sleep patterns for your kids this school year. I know my kids have to wake up really early. They're a 6 a.m. wake up. So even though my kids are 9 and 11, we shoot for an 8 p.m. bedtime. Now we shoot for 8 p.m., meaning that it's often 8:30 and sometimes on sports nights even a little bit later than that. But we really do focus on trying to aim for getting to bed as close to 8 p.m. for our kids at that age as possible. So again, just leaving with that parting image of our lovely crazy dog, Gus. So again, having an understanding of your child, of what you're seeing and why, I think is so powerful. It's easy to get frustrated and upset as parents, and we want our kids to be successful, and we want to do the right things to help them be successful. So recognizing where they are developmentally as well as what your expectations are, I think is so important. Recognizing that attention and focus isn't intentional bad behavior, that their body might require more energy and more work to pay attention and to block out background noise and sound. So again, I always encourage people, if you have any questions or concerns, starting with an assessment, information to me is power. It allows you to see why you're seeing what you're seeing and to create a roadmap of what you can do going forward. So again, if you're wondering what your year could look like for your child, for your family with an improved attention and focus, an assessment is a great place to start. Who we work with at Brain Balance, we, for the last 10 years, we've worked with kids ages 4 through 12th grade, and we've just recently expanded our ages to 24, which has been so fun. Our older students are really able to verbalize the change that they can feel and notice in themselves with attention and focus and other areas as well. Victoria, if I can hand it back over to you at this point to talk about the tools that we're sharing with everyone, that would be great.
That sounds awesome. If you just want to go to the next slide, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And then we'll get into questions in a minute.
That slide?
Okay. There's a little bit of a delay in the way the slides are changing, but I'm just going to get into it. So thank you everyone for listening to us today. I was just looking at the amount of attendees that we have, and back one more slide. Sorry, Becca. We have more attendees than we ever had today, which is really amazing considering we had to reschedule. We appreciate you all so much. We really want to make sure that you feel comfortable and you feel good about putting a plan in place to help your child succeed this school year and, you know, beyond just this school year, but in the years to come, kind of setting up for success this year so that it impacts future years. As a special gift for attending today, we'll be sending you a guide that we put together this month. We're really proud of it, and we've just been loving it. Even some of our coworkers have been immediately taking it home to utilize the tips that we put together with their families, which has been exciting to us. And it's called the Ultimate Back to School Guide for Parents of Kids Who Struggle. Some of you have children who have already begun the school year. Some of you might be returning to school soon. And we put this guide together to really just give you some valuable tools, some valuable steps to take with your child in the coming school year to prepare to enter the school year with less worry and kind of, you know, have a plan as a family to make sure that some structure is put in place for the year to make sure that that worry and the anxiety around getting to school and focusing in school, behaving well in school is lessened. So please look for an email from us with a link to download the resource as well as the webinar recording. We're going to be sending those out on Thursday and Friday, so tomorrow and Friday. In addition, we really appreciate all of you who have logged on to listen to us, as I said, especially since we had to reschedule from last week, and we value your time. And so as a special thank you for who specifically attended today, you will receive, as you can see here on the far right, our Cool Summer Treats e-cookbook. It's a really beautiful cookbook and contains some recipes to, you know, as it's going to be getting cooler, you can still round out your summer by incorporating some of these really healthy treats into your year. We feel that, you know, at the end of the summer, and we went through all this information with Rebecca, thank you, Rebecca, about how diet affects our attention and focus. And so we want you to have, you know, that doesn't mean if we're changing diet that you need to be cutting out treats. We have some great ideas for you. So thanks a lot for attending today, and look for that email. If you see your child falling behind developmentally, if you identify with any of the challenges with focus and attention that we discussed today, we encourage you to reach out to us for help. We're here to support you. We want to help you provide a plan and put a plan in place for your child. If you're thinking about brain balance, we want to make the process of getting started easy for you. So if you've registered for the webinar and you complete an assessment for your child between tomorrow, August 22nd, and September 23rd, in one of our local centers, you will receive the Special School Lunches e-cookbook, which is the one in the middle here, which is designed by our registered dietitians. It's filled with a variety of lunch recipes that will help fuel brain development. And now that school's back in session, I think, again, we want to just take part of your planning out of the way for you. So in addition to the guide, to have the e-cookbook that has school lunches already set out in place with foods that we know will fuel brain development and not hinder focus and attention. We're really happy to be able to provide those resources for you. So again, look for some email follow-ups from us. Rebecca, if you could go to the next slide, and we're going to start to take some questions. So I have a lot of questions here while I was speaking. Let me just go up to the top really quickly.
while you're looking at the questions, Victoria, please, if there's other topics that people are interested in hearing more on,
Yes.
we get our topic ideas from you guys, and I have fun talking about just about anything. So please don't hesitate to reach out and share if there's an area that you would love to learn more about. Next month's topic, I believe, is going to be on homework time and maximizing homework time. All of these, like Victoria said, are recorded, so you can find these on the website. And again, if you enjoy this information, if it's helpful, I'm Dr. Rebecca Jackson. You can also follow information on Facebook and Instagram to see what additional information and talks and webinars we have going on.
Okay, awesome. So we have a lot of questions, and I just got to the top of them. I'm going to try to read them in order. This is a really great question. I grew my child very healthy. We were playing outside at the mud, water, walking, gave them a healthy homemade diet, less time on screen. But as they grow, now they're having less attention and more behavior problems. Please help me.
Oh, that's such a common piece. Really take a look at the balance between screen time and movement. We're going to tend to see a flare up in negative behaviors after screen time. So if your child is spending 2 hours on a video game and you ask them to turn it off, the no and meltdown and pushback isn't because often that they're not wanting to turn it off. It's they've shut down the part of their brain that does emotional regulation. They haven't been moving. Remember, muscles turn on the brain, but it turns on the part of our brain that does regulation. And so you're going to tend to get much more in the way of negative behaviors with lots of screen time. So again, screen time's not bad. It's just always looking for that balance and understanding what you're setting yourself up for. So if you allow or the big chunks of screen time happens, brace yourself for more in the way of the negative behavior afterwards.
Awesome.
And again,
Thank you.
Development.
Okay, I love this question. We actually have two very similar questions here on the same topic, but how do you help your child get ready in the morning? So what can we talk through, what should be a good routine for kids in the morning to set them up for better focus during the year?
Yeah, that's going to vary so much on age. To me, success is all about having systems and being organized, and I'm not a highly organized person by nature. We do as much as we can the night before, and so packing lunches, having clothes laid out, having my daughter, pick the scrunchie she's going to wear for her hair, and having her, cross-country bag pre-packed. So all we need to do is refresh the water bottle and go. Having kids where I like to have the kids responsible for things. So again, depending on their age, at 9 and 11, my kids do get themselves up and dressed. They make their breakfast. The younger child, that's not an age-appropriate expectation, but having them responsible for a few things. And so if it's you lay out the clothes and they put them on scenario, now be careful with that. We had a period when my son was probably in first grade where I was laying out the clothes, he was getting dressed, and I realized I was behind on laundry and did about 3 weeks of laundry all at once, and I think I had 3 pairs of underwear come through. So there's an upside and a downside to working on some of that responsibility. But having that system and routine where you wake up at the same time every day, as much as prepared ahead of time, and there's clear expectations of what the child's going to do. I love a dry erase board for reminders so that you're not constantly having to say the same thing over and over again. And so if your dry erase board is, get dressed, brush your teeth, come downstairs, keeping the steps simple and written out, and your child checks off the list and maybe they get a sticker when they come downstairs. I love visual cues and reminders for the younger ones. I love reward systems, and so a sticker chart can go a long way.
Awesome. This mom in particular, Jill, I apologize. I see that you put 2 questions through, but questions came in between your question. To tag on to that last question, Rebecca, Jill was saying that her 10-year-old daughter gets up an hour and a half before getting on the bus, and she does already lay her outfit out the night before. So I think we're having a little bit of a time manage
Yeah.
the issue, having a
Yep.
tough time getting out the door?
So, gamify it. Do stopwatches, do a, can you get yourself dressed and down for breakfast in a half hour? And don't go from an hour and a half to an expectation of 30 minutes. Maybe you set a goal and you sit down and you set it with your daughter of, okay, can we trim 10 minutes off or even 5 minutes off each week so that ultimately, we can get it down to a 45-minute or an hour time. We also have to keep in mind all of us wake up different and function different. She may need more time to wake up and be active and be ready for the day. So maybe for her, putting in some movement first thing in the morning would help to wake her up so she's getting going faster. So maybe the routine is, she can take her time getting dressed, and then the whole family does, I'm making this up, 20 jump ropes and 10 push-ups, and then you move on to breakfast and brushing teeth. Putting movement in to wake her up and get the blood flowing might be helpful. Doing a chart with goals and rewards and tracking and stopwatch. It's so easy to turn these things negative, and it's so easy to start the day with, come on, hurry up, let's go. And I feel so bad in those moments because I hate sending the kids off for the day on a negative note. So if there's a way that you can gamify it, make it fun, have a reward that she's working towards, and really celebrate the, oh my gosh, you got ready 5 minutes faster today. That's awesome. I bet you can do it again tomorrow, is where I'd keep that focus.
Awesome. Okay, can you give an example of a 1-minute brain break? Thanks so much for the information.
The beauty of the 1-minute brain break is you can do just about anything. Again, I love involving the kids with ideas. And so if you and your kids sat down and on scraps of paper wrote out everything that you can think of. So jump 100 times, run around the house, sprint the stairs, jumping jacks, burpees, hula hoop. What it is doesn't matter. It's just doing something to engage the muscles. Squats, lunges, sit-ups. It would be fun to do a fishbowl full of different pieces of paper with different activities to do. And each time you do a brain break, your child reaches their hand in, they pull it out, and whatever the brain break is, that's what you do. So get creative, get silly, get fun. There's so many fun. Have the kids create their own obstacle course or come up with their own break idea to really get their buy-in and involvement engagement as well.
Okay, and we're going to take 2 more questions. How do you deal with a very talk kid? I think talkative is probably what Heather meant here, especially during dinner time.
Same thing, I would do movement before dinner. So if we're getting lots of something, lots of talking, lots of motion, lots of activity, that can be a red flag of development being a little bit behind in some aspects. So again, that's a child that hasn't developed the full inhibition that they need. So again, what's going to turn on the brain, what's going to help with development so that ultimately we work towards developing more inhibition is going to be using the senses and using the muscles. So if you find that you've got a child that's dominating at the dinner time and so you're not able to have a relaxed family conversation or engagement, taking a couple minutes to jump rope right before dinner can again wake up and enhance the brain. You can also do a hey buddy, I want to hear all about your day, but then I want to hear from everybody else too. So let's put 2 minutes on the clock and you tell me everything that you can think of about your day in 2 minutes. And then when you're done with that, we're going to listen to your brother because I also want to hear about his day. So trying to do it again in a way where we're not, I think of Ryan. We don't want the Ryan who's got so much to say and is just bursting with life and fun. We don't want to dim that light. But family time at the dinner table can be challenging. So think about development, think about movement, and maybe try that time approach.
Okay, awesome. Here we go. I have one more left, and I'm just I'm going to skip through because we had a couple that were a little bit off topic, and I just want to make sure that this one question that I think was repeated a few times gets read. How much daydreaming is considered excessive and a reason for concern? I thought this was such a common question.
That is a really interesting question in that we all daydream sometimes. To quantify that, when it becomes problematic is when it's interfering with everyday life. So if you're daydreaming, so you miss the instructions for the worksheet, that's a problem, even if it only happens on occasion. So daydreaming when it interferes is problematic, period. And it's important to understand, again, daydreaming is still an aspect of attention and focus. And it's still a red flag that there's potentially some gaps and holes in development leading to that brain checking out and not maintaining those sustained networks of attention and focus. So it looks different than the hyperactive component, but it can be just as detrimental to attention and focus and learning and conversations as the hyperactive side of things.
Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you so much again. We really appreciate you logging on to listen to us today and to taking the time to put your questions through. We got some comments on future topics as well. And again, we want to make sure that we know from you what you'd like to hear from us. So again, thanks for taking your time. If you'd like to follow along with us, you can go to our website, which is brainbalance.com. If you're looking to inquire about how to get started with Brain Balance, you can click on our locations page, look for your local center and contact a local center to get started or find out more information. Our centers want to meet you. They want to understand your unique challenges and struggles that are going on with your child. So again, please reach out to them individually. If you'd like to follow along for more tips and tools, you can follow us on Facebook. Our handle is @BrainBalanceCenters or facebook.com/BrainBalanceCenters. And you can click the locations tab there as well to find your local center. And again, we've been posting a lot on Instagram. We have some great content there. Follow us on Instagram @BrainBalanceCenters. Again, thank you so much, Rebecca. We appreciate your knowledge. It's just a wealth of information. And again, any of you would love to hear about a different topic when we send you the webinar follow-up emails, we'd love to have you reply and let us know what you'd like to hear from us next. Next month, we're going to be talking through homework tips and strategies for this school year. So we will hear from you then. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.